Phone check. 1, 2. The microphone check. 1, 2, 1, 2. The microphone check. I got my headphones tuned between two different AM stations, and my briefcase is full of declassified information. Declassified. Declassified.
Good evening and welcome to News from Neptune for the 48th week of 2013. For more than 20 years, this program has been a spontaneous and unrehearsed discussion of the news of the week and its coverage by the media. First on a so-called community radio station, and when censored and locked out of there, welcomed, I'm happy to say, by the good folks at Urbana Public Television. I'm Carl Estabrook. My discussants tonight are Karen Aram and David Johnson, and we'll hear something about what they've been up to recently to start off this evening. Our program's format is to take turns proposing an item from the week's news that's been ignored or misreported, sometimes even innocently, and then asking our colleagues for comments. At the end, we'll have time for Coburn's Corner, where we'll nominate cliches, overused phrases, and tedious words for elimination. Our program's name, News from Neptune, was chosen to honor Noam Chomsky, who's been talking sense about American politics for more than twice the 20 years we've been on the air. Chomsky has said that in the American media, either you repeat the same conventional doctrines everybody is saying, or else you say something true, and it will sound like it's from Neptune. Today is November 29th, 2013. On this day in 1847, at a banquet in Paris commemorating the Polish insurrection of 1830, the anarchist Mikhail Bakunin delivered a speech denouncing the Russian government and was subsequently expelled from France. He was currying favor with the Russian government at the time. The Russian ambassador, in an attempt to discredit Bakunin, circulated the false rumor that Bakunin was employed by the Russian government to pose as a revolutionary. What you probably didn't say in French in the 1840s was a black advance, but that's what he meant. The rumor was spread, by the way, by Bakunin's rival, the man the London police knew as Charles Marcus, and the Prussian police called Karl Marx. Marx was editor of a newspaper at the time, and he spread the rumor that Bakunin was a Russian agent. Expelled from France, Bakunin left left Paris, went to Brussels, where he fetched up with Marx again. The rivalry and contestation between Bakunin and Marx, an important part of socialist history, Western history, national history in the mid-19th century, and of course it's largely gone down the memory hole for us. It's been taken up in a strange place. One of the leading playwrights in English today, I would say the leading playwright in English today, is Tom Stoppard, whose remarkable trilogy of plays, The Coast of Utopia, that played in New York for more than a year, was a presentation of the radical history of the 19th century in which Bakunin and Marx were both characters. I was privileged to see the series and was amazed at how Stoppard, who is quite brilliant, and a man of rather rightish political disposition, puts Bakunin in the center of the story, and Bakunin is powerful enough that he takes it away from Stoppard. Stoppard is too good a playwright to misrepresent the man he's picturing. And if you ever have a chance, and I hope you might, to see Stoppard's plays, known together as The Coast of Utopia, you'll see that the central character becomes Bakunin. And this argument with Marx that we're speaking of the anniversary of is a central part of the discussion. It's quite remarkable, it seems to me, when our political history is dramatized more on the Broadway stage than in our popular discussions of what in fact is going on, what the French government and the Russian government and the American government are doing today. But there it is. There are other anniversaries today that I may have a chance to mention, but I think we'll press on. You're watching News from Neptune, and we have two commentators today. I think we'll start with Karen Aram. Karen, you spent the morning in the cold, is that right?
Yes, at Walmart.
Do you want to say a word about that?
No, I'd rather leave it to Dave to
Okay.
discuss, since he was one of the leaders and orchestrators. Of
David
the,
organized it, but I knew
yes.
I know you were there.
Yes.
We were all leaders there. It's just
No.
I made a few phone calls, like a few other people, but no. Today, across the country, there's over 1,500 Walmart stores that were targeted for protests against Walmart's abusive labor practices, which includes not only paying their workers very low wages, but the workers receiving little or no benefits. Also, bullying, pay discrimination against women, legal firings for speaking out about conditions in the stores, as well as unionization, which is the employee's right under the law. And there was, in fact, a recent National Labor Relations Board ruling against Walmart for the actions they've taken against employees for doing just that. So today in Urbana, as well as 6 locations in the Chicago area, there were protests going on, and as Karen stated, that we had one here in Urbana that started at about 9:30, between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, and it was quite a lot of fun. Actually, because early on, when just a few of us arrived, we were immediately approached by Walmart security as we were standing on the public sidewalk and told that that was their property, and that we weren't supposed to be on their property. If we didn't move, that they were going to call the police. We said that this was public property, for them to go ahead and call the police, and they left, and no police arrived though. So anyway, we had a fairly good turnout considering the weather, anyway, I have some film footage that will be shown on Urbana Public Television of the protest today. But the importance of this whole Walmart thing is that Walmart is the largest one of the largest corporations literally in the world. They made $17 billion in profits last year. That's net profits. Yet most of their workers earn so little money that they have to apply for Medicaid and food stamps, which tantamountly comes to the fact that the taxpayers are subsidizing Walmart, a multi-billion-dollar company. So I'm just happy that Karen and some other people from the community, concerned citizens, showed up today, as well as all the other locations around Illinois and around the United States.
What was your experience of the morning, Karen?
Me?
Hmm.
It was cold, very cold, and yes, there were people there, and now I saw one policeman show up.
At the end, yes.
At the end. He was very friendly. He must have been freezing. He didn't have a coat on. He'd been called by Walmart, evidently, and he just talked with the people a bit. I didn't catch everything that was said. I was told that he just said, as long as we didn't interfere on Murphy's property.
Which is a gas station?
The gas station there, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. That we were okay. He didn't seem to have any problem with us.
Yeah, I believe that police officer arrived because at the end of the protest today, or towards the end, there was a delegation that went to the store to hand a letter from the interfaith community to pass on to Walmart's management and corporate headquarters. Interesting thing about that is we weren't even 50 feet from the door, and security was already coming out the door to greet us. So obviously they must have a lot of security cameras on the outside of the store as well as inside.
Yeah.
So I guess they called the police because we dared to walk up to present a letter to management about the situation of their abusive labor practices.
And the letter situation was explained to him, and he was like very positive. So, yeah.
Well, like we were talking earlier before the show, I mean, most police departments have, police officers have unions, and I think they realize that, considering what's going on in other parts of the country, is that, really, I think they realize that they're part of the working class, and that they might be in the same boat someday as far as possibly having their union busted, and them having private security companies, put in their place. So I think, a lot of police officers understand that, labor issues are most of the time their issues as well.
Yeah, I hope that's the case, yeah.
David, what do you say to the charge that's being put about by the Walmart people and then naturally reported as straight news by the media, that these protests across the country are being engineered by various union groups, they mention SEIU and others, and don't really represent, as it were, a spontaneous protest from Walmart workers, that this is the attempt of the dwindling organized organized labor movement in the U.S. to become relevant by finding a large group of people that they can speak for.
Well, I mean, with that, Carl, I mean, of course there's unions helping these workers. I mean, employers have employer organizations that represent their interests collectively, and that therefore, why can't workers have organizations that represent their interests collectively? Because, one worker against a multi-billion-dollar company faces no chance whatsoever. And so I say more power to SEIU or the United Food and Commercial Workers are doing this. But what's interesting is that these workers, they tried to file unfair labor practice charges against the United Food and Commercial Workers, but the thing is Walmart workers don't have a union yet. So really they just have an association of Walmart workers. And the United Food and Commercial Workers are merely consultants. I mean, we've seen this game being played by corporate America on some very, some insidious levels, and they're they just turn the tables on them and saying, look, we're just giving advice to these workers that want better wages and conditions in their stores. So I guess my main point here is, if things were so great at Walmart, these the workers that got arrested in downtown LA for doing civil disobedience, and the ones, thousands of workers that have walked out of dozens, if not hundreds, of Walmart stores around the country in the last year, obviously there's problems there. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get anybody to do any of these things.
What's actually being asked for? I mean, in this series of demonstrations.
Well, I mean, the main point is to try to convince Walmart to pay its workers a living wage. And more to the point is to not interfere in the process of Walmart workers joining a union. Because that's what the National Labor Relations Board ruling against Walmart was about, is that they were basically harassing and disciplining and firing workers who had talked to other workers about joining the union with them. And this is their legal right under the law. And Walmart violated the law when they did this. Now, we all know, Carl, that corporations in America get away with this all the time. And the fact that Walmart got its hands slapped here finally, I mean, is finally they're enforcing the law. But, that's really the bottom line here, is that they want better wages. They want some, affordable health care or some other kind of benefits. And they also want to be, treated with dignity and respect. And also, I've heard that one of the practices of Walmart is to do just erratic, irregular work schedules, which the employees would like to have a little bit more say on, as far as having a regular work schedule.
There's the overall question that for 40 years of neoliberalism, clearly one of the goals of neoliberalism has been to roll back unions and union representation and organizing drives and various other things. And they've had remarkable how shall I put it, cooperation in this campaign, particularly from the Reagan administration on, which essentially made it. I mean, it was still legal to strike on the books, but the way the Reagan administration treated it, the right essentially went away. And of course, as soon as we got Democratic administrations, that was reversed, wasn't it, David?
No, not really, Carl.
Oh, really? Is that right? You mean
yes.
the the Clinton and Obama administrations were just as bad on this as the Reagan administration?
Well, they took a little different tact. I mean, they basically
cover sin with smooth names, as they say.
That's
yes.
well put, Carl. Basically, they would tell organized labor what they wanted to hear, and they ended up pretty much not doing anything at best, or continuing the same policies of the previous Republican administrations. First thing Obama, when he was elected, was expected to do from organized labor, after they gave him, at least $40 million in campaign money and millions of hours of volunteer time for their members, going door to door and phone banking, not to mention voting for him, was they wanted him to support and push for the Employee Free Choice Act, which was basically would make it to where the United States would become like Canada, Europe, and other civilized countries, to where to form a union, all you needed was 50% plus one worker in a workplace to sign union certification cards, and then the union would automatically occur. As soon as Obama took office, he basically told organized labor to go take a hike, so many words, by saying that he didn't think it was a good thing to push for this bill right now because the Chamber of Commerce was opposed to it. After $40 million and all that support organized labor did for Obama, and within 3 weeks of taking office, he basically told him to go take a hike with that regard. So, I mean, this fits in with the neoliberal agenda. I mean, the low wages, inadequate health care, attacks on what public health care and Social Security and public pensions we have now, trying to privatize those. I mean, it's all part of the neoliberal agenda, which I think the Walmart campaign, even though it's, other stores like Walmart are just as guilty of a lot of these practices as Walmart, it's just that Walmart's the largest one. If they can be convinced to change their ways, I think there might be some hope that the other stores would also fall in line. It's not just that, it's also fast food. It's just this whole low-wage economy, this whole disparity of wealth that's causing harm, because all this wealth in just a few hands, and then all these people out there working sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, having to do 2 or 3 jobs because the wages are so low. It's not good for the economy as a whole. People don't have enough money to spend on anything but food, clothing, and shelter. It's not going to do much for the economy in general.
And most Americans know what's going on in their own particular line of work and so forth, but I think it's still the case that because of essentially the control of the media, most Americans don't realize that there has been a conscious campaign for more than a generation now to lower wages, reduce social supports, reduce union support, certainly. In other words, to repristinate, if you can put it that way, the capitalist structure, whereby workers have to take whatever is offered or go hungry, and employers can always find plenty of draftees from the reserve army of the unemployed to do their jobs. Unemployment serves capitalism, obviously, and the outcome of the attempt to remove the government regulation that has softened some of the worst edges of capitalism is the nature of the neoliberal campaign, and it's supported by Republicans and Democrats alike. As you say, is sometimes in a different rhetorical fashion. They say things that sound a little different, but it's shadowboxing. It's good cop, bad cop. And so we get a Democratic administration that's at least as bad for questions of union organizing as the Republican predecessor.
Carl, this is a trend that's been going on. It's worldwide. It's not just here in the United States. And, it's interesting because I try to follow world news, too, and you see this happening all over the world. And I thought it was interesting today seeing some coverage about some occurrences that happened in Thailand. I mean, there's been some ongoing social unrest difficulties in Thailand for some time now, but I just saw a little news feed on RT television this morning about how demonstrators attacked and occupied a local military headquarters. And I know Karen lived in Thailand for I think over 20 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And I'd like to hear what she thinks about this.
Well, I didn't see that report, and so my first question is, were they red shirts or what other color were their shirts? Which sounds so ridiculous, I know, but the red shirts basically, although they're portrayed as being supporters of the current proxy government, okay, many of them are not. Many of them are simply a pro-democracy group, and in fact, they have, Thaksin was the prime minister who they supported initially. He was overthrown in a 2006 coup. And then his sister, Yingluck, was his proxy, and she was then elected. And I draw parallels to this with Egypt in that, you bring down a dictator, but then you have an election, and then another group comes out. They don't like the elected leader. They overthrow him in a coup, and then you end up with the same people back in power, which is the military in general. And this is where the parallel exists. The details are quite different, but the parallel is the same with the military being in charge.
Now, is the monarchy, do they have any power at all in
It's
Thailand?
a constitutional monarchy.
Okay.
Of course, one has to receive sanction for anything that is done, and they usually sanction anything that the government or the military request. And when you tell me that the military headquarters were taken over, it sounds as though it must have been the red shirts, because they know who they're fighting. They know it's the military. The military is the power, the main power in the nation. What I do see is a coup by the military to remove this government. Okay, now, as I said, I recently wrote to a friend, an American who is retired there with his Thai wife. He's retired from the UN. And I sent him an article. I think it was the article that you had sent me, Carl.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked for his impression. And I got the same information back that I think most of us get, that you will see in the Bangkok Post, that you will read in all the news feed, except RT, is that, well, they try to paint this as a poor against the wealthy elite, but it's really because Thaksin, by way of his proxy, has infrastructure project contracts coming up that we don't really need, in spite of the fact that some of them they probably do need. And I don't want to cover over the fact that Thaksin is corrupt. He is every bit as corrupt as every other government that they've had, maybe more so. But it has to be recognized that Thaksin represents the police, as where the other parties have always represented the military. And they have business factions, and they've often been in conflict. And nobody talks about this. So this is what I'm trying to get at, because this is what I heard and knew when I lived there. But when you live there, you're kind of in this microcosm where you're dependent upon the media. Thailand has never had a free media. And I know the former editor of the English Language Daily, but they would use self-censorship. So it's the self-censorship that's required, because you cannot continue your business if you say anything that could be construed as illegal. Thailand has a law called lèse majesté, which refers to saying anything negative about the king, but that has been used so broadly, especially of late, in that foreigners and Thais alike, if they even refer to the ruling elite, can be arrested. And while some of them maybe only spend, an American recently, Joe Gordon, because he had done some translations of an unauthorized autobiography or biography, of the king. It was unauthorized. It's one that I read. Nonetheless, he was arrested upon, he's an American citizen, he was arrested upon arrival in Bangkok, and he finally admitted his guilt. You always admit your guilt. You never claim innocence in a Thai court of law. I'm serious about this. I have advised people, you never go to trial. You never declare your innocence. You always throw yourself on the mercy of the court and claim you're guilty, because they view just your arrest as being guilty. And then you hope for the mercy of the king. Once a year, the king, usually around December, will pardon many criminals, and your best hope is that your embassy will apply pressure, very gentle pressure, and have you released. And that's how some people have been pardoned. It sounds, I know it sounds like something out of a fairy tale, and we don't get this. We have to remember the U.S. is Thailand is the U.S. satellite. It really, really is.
That's an important point, I think.
It's a very important point. Now, do I see the U.S. hand in anything that's happening today? Not necessarily, because it really shouldn't matter to the U.S. too much whether Thaksin is in power or whether the Democrat Party is in power in Bangkok and Thailand.
So long as they can keep order.
Right, as long as they can keep order.
Right.
So I don't really see the CIA behind this as I saw them behind many things that took place previously. That's something also that has been covered up, but it's known. And I have found some documented evidence of our complicity in a slaughter that took place at a university campus in 1976. But now it's the children of the former CIA, some of whom are very wealthy individuals. I also know banks, U.S. banks, what their involvement is all you have to do is have your eyes open and do some research, and it's obvious. But whether or not the U.S. government really cares, whether the CIA is that prominent or prevalent in daily life there, I don't see the issue so much. Similar again to Egypt. It's like as long as we can sell our weapons and as long as the government can keep control.
That's right.
Now the only thing I can say about this is that it is in the U.S. best interest to have the Democrat Party in Thailand in power because they are represented by the military, and after all, the military and we work in conjunction. So they're the ones that buy our weapons and keep the lid on everything. So it's possible that is in the U.S. best interest, but whether or not the U.S. is involving themselves the way they did in the past, I don't know. I don't like to speculate on that. There are enough interest amongst the Asians, and something I want to point out is that I actually believe what I see, some of the things I have seen happening in the U.S. over the past 4 years, I actually believe that we have learned from Asia some of the tactics that they have used. I can't come up with anything right at the moment, but I have actually thought, well, I saw that happening in Asia. I saw the Asians using those tactics. And remember, they've been operating politically and doing things much longer than us. So I think we have learned some tactics from them and strategy from them. Now, who took over it's hard to tell because all it takes is one provocateur to bring about bloodshed, to bring about a military reaction. So I'm tempted to think that it would not have been the red shirts.
Here's what RT says about it. The group demonstrating against the current rule. This was the article David was referring to about the attack on the military center. The group demonstrating against the current rule calls itself the Movement for Democracy and numbers about 200,000 people. It also represents some 45 unions, point you were making, David, one of which represents Thai Airways. The carrier on Thursday threatened that any harm coming to protesters will result in the cancellation of all its flights. Its president warned that the airline warned that if the confrontation turns physical, the union, quote, will increase the pressure by stopping the plane wheels from turning. So your parallel with Egypt, I think, holds again, Karen, with the fact that the original demonstrations against Mubarak in Egypt grew out of what were labor union disputes, and a union that was calling a demonstration to commemorate the suppression of a labor action before. The peculiarities of the class formation in Thailand that you mentioned, RT also notes. It says, Thaksin, a billionaire telecommunications mogul who built his political power via a series of populist measures, has ensured the unfaltering allegiance of the rural poor, who twice voted him into office in 2001 and 2005, and in 2006 he was ousted in a military coup. So there is both a labor and a class division behind these particular demonstrations, and as you suggest, the lines really aren't that clear at all. And I'm sure the lights are burning late in Foggy Bottom right now in that section of the State Department that's trying to decide, how do we handle Southeast Asia? The U.S. sees, of course, Thailand in the context of its long-term interest in Southeast Asia, going back to Vietnam times and before. And this is part of the worldwide operation that the U.S. government is engaged in. We can't have the threat of a good example of people taking things into their own hands, and we can't have that in Thailand either.
Now, here's a comment. I'm reading some articles lately by Giles G. Ungpakorn. He is a Thai academic and author who had to flee to the UK a couple years ago over least majest laws. And since he is, his mother is British, he has U.S. or UK citizenship as well as Thai, and this is not unusual. He has said that, and this was 2 years ago, the red shirts are not merely Thaksin puppets. They are self-organized in community groups, and some are showing frustration with Thaksin's lack of progressive leadership. Especially over, and I will not continue that. A Republican movement is growing. Many left-leaning Thais, like myself, Mr. Ungpakorn, are not Thaksin supporters. We opposed his human rights abuses, but we are with the citizens' movement for real democracy. And Mr. Giles Ungpakorn is, he considers himself a socialist, but he also mentioned that one of the problems is that since 2005, this growing class war between the poor and the old elites, it's not a pure class war, because he said it's due to a vacuum on the left in the past. And that's how millionaire populist politicians like Thaksin have managed to provide leadership to the poor.
Vacuum on the left.
Yes.
Where have we heard of that before?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, it really, really, but that's 2 years ago. Now, he has been quoted, you may find him quoted in some of the RT articles, because I was reading something recently whereby he was quoted just last night. But I found out he has a Facebook, so I'm going to try to link up with him on Facebook and get him linked up maybe with Aware, so we can.
There was an
continue
armed
this.
insurrection in Thailand quite a few years ago, and then it was ended peacefully when they were surrendered. What was the background on that?
Which one? Because they've had
Which
something
one?
like
Okay.
18.
2006.
They've had so many. You just cannot imagine. I've lived through so many coups. Most of them not terribly violent, but as I pointed out, when you have tanks rolling into town,
You must know it's martial law.
and you do, yes, and you're under martial law. When I went to Thailand, we were under martial law at the time. In fact, I remember going to the movie theater, and when the King's National Anthem was played, people stood up. Well, always throughout, but that first year there, people jumped. And I was so startled. I said, my God, are we a bunch of Nazis? I mean, that's what it looked like to me. And my husband pretty much was like, shut up, you know? After martial law was dropped, and eventually people just stand out of reference, just as we would if somebody was singing the national anthem or something. But they've had many coups. The one that is referred to of recent is the one that took place or the insurrection where many red shirts were killed. That took place in 2010. And so an amnesty bill was written, and this amnesty bill was supposed to allow Thaksin to give him the right to come back, or what is it, take away the charge of lèse majesté, amnesty for Thaksin. But it was also supposed to what was it supposed to do? It was supposed to bring about, I have to mention the fact that the yellow shirts at the time, okay? Yellow shirts were those that were representing the elite. The military never fired on any yellow shirts, okay? They only fire on the red shirts. That's very telling. But what they did was they amended the amnesty bill to include amnesty for the politicians and the people who fired on and killed some of the red shirts. So that's why now you have, by having amended this bill, you don't really have the red shirts are no longer supporting it, okay? The pro-democracy people no longer want to support it. They feel that they've been betrayed. One of the things that I read last night, and I wasn't able, my printer ran out of ink, the fear is that the elite will make a deal, military will make some kind of a deal with Thaksin that he'll make a deal with them.
He'll sell out.
He'll sell out
his radical, as it were, supporters.
His radical supporters.
Who's
exactly.
ever heard of such a thing? Huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what's the latest fear. So I'm waiting to see what will happen. But I do predict there's going to be a coup, and maybe this military takeover will bring about the coup that the military is just looking for. I mean, I can tell you, I was in Thailand in 2006, May, before the coup. We knew it was going to happen, and I could not believe how many Thais it has to happen. We have to have a coup because this government is just no good. They're too corrupt. And they keep focusing, people keep focusing, including my friend from the UN, on, well, there's all these infrastructure projects, and there's some kind of a rice deal, and of course the selling off of assets, of Thai assets, I think to Singapore. I think they were going to buy their telecommunications. okay, these are not things we want to see done, but the real crux to the problem now is that the rural poor, they have not been a part of anything, any of the success of Thailand's growth and development. And people do eventually rise up, and when things get really bad, an example would be during the crisis in '97, and the IMF came into Thailand in, this was during the baht devaluation, and in their infinite wisdom, they decided that one of the things they would do would apply a 7% value-added tax onto everything across the board. So while the financiers fled the country, because of course most of their money has already been sent out of the country in Swiss or U.S. bank accounts, here's the rural poor. They've got to pay 7% on everything they purchase, including their bags of rice, to feed their families. And only a couple academics who had been former socialists hiding in the jungle in the 70s did speak out against that.
This was the Asian tryout for austerity.
Right.
I mean, this is the IMF enforcing the Washington Consensus, which is now spread worldwide, including Europe and the U.S., although we haven't quite admitted it yet here. That nevertheless is clearly the government program.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the programs that I saw applied in Asia in the 90s that I've been seeing here since then.
And it seems to me that the interest of the American government in Thailand is bound up with Obama's much trumpeted pivot to Asia.
Yeah.
I mean, now when he says pivot to Asia, he means primarily China and Japan, of course. Mm-hmm. And what do you all make of the latest news on that front? I must admit, the Obama administration continues to surprise me. Sometimes they surprise me. Very rarely they surprise me by doing something that I almost want to call right, such as the Iranian deal, but they were forced into it. But they also surprise me in the depths of their perversity and other things. What about flying the B-52s into the restricted area in China?
I'm very disturbed over that. I was pleased to see that China did back down.
But did they back down? How
well,
so? I mean, they didn't shoot the planes down, but then they never threatened to. It wasn't a no-fly zone.
They kind of backed off from doing anything. I give them credit.
Open fire, yeah.
I actually give them credit for having enough sense. And generally, the Chinese do have enough sense to avoid violence.
But how do you understand what the American position? I mean, what is the U.S. doing? China makes this statement about its. Basically, it just suggested it wanted notification of planes using this contested zone between China and Japan, the East China Sea. And the U.S. immediately flies 2 B-52s through that. What are they thinking in Washington?
Japan is claiming that those islands as their own. Now, the islands are nothing but empty rock, but evidently oil or gas, what called gas deposits have been discovered near there. The thing is, if you look at the map, it's so close. Those islands actually should belong to Taiwan, which, as you know, before Taiwan,
they're closer to Taiwan than they are to
Formosa. Right, they were Formosa before they were Taiwan, and before they were Formosa, they were part of China. Okay, and China considers Taiwan part of China. You know, they're letting them go function as they want. You know, with their own political whatever. No. But it is a real major issue. And here's the thing. By the way, I was just looking through Iris Chang's novel, The Rape of Nanjing, last night. I've had the book on my shelf for years, ever since it first came out, and I've not ever been able to actually read it because I've seen enough about the atrocities committed by the Japanese in China that I just can't bear to read it, okay? But I was looking for information related to where some of her research came from and some of the things that I have been reading recently, which I actually was going to bring an article in the New Yorker again by Pankra Mish. Yeah. I never say his name. Mm-hmm. He had a brilliant book review of 2 new books that have come out on the war in Asia. And it is fascinating, and we will have to get into that at another time, because it does play into what you're asking right now, Carl, a little bit about what is the U.S. doing.
Yeah.
Well, they're rearming Japan, okay? And you have to think, and I know this for a fact, having lived in Southeast Asia for 22 years, plus Shanghai for another 2, and Hong Kong for 7 months. And they have never, the hostilities are still there. I mean, they do business. I know Japanese people who live in Asia, live in China, and they're perfectly content. But the things that took place, the atrocities that were committed against the Chinese during World War II by the Japanese, and the Japanese have never apologized, they've never even acknowledged it.
Well, and of course, the Abe government in Tokyo now is asserting a nationalist line that is annoying both the Americans and the Chinese. And what the U.S. is concerned about, we don't really care too much about, crimes from long ago, whether we committed them or anybody else did. What we do care is whether our writ runs in Tokyo and in Asia and in general. Will Japan do what it's told? And it's, the only problem is when Abe and his government begin to suggest they won't. So that puts the U.S. in a peculiar position vis-a-vis this Chinese notification zone. Tell me who you think made the decision, who in the American government made the decision to send the B-52s through the zone. Was it the military, that is the Pacific Command, simply saying, hey, we do this regularly, sure things are more difficult now, but we do this regularly and we're going to go ahead and do it again? Or was it decided at another level in the American government, up to and including the president, saying, if we're going to pivot to Asia, we can't let the Chinese get away with this?
I take the
I have my candidate. I think I know. I know who decided to send the B-52s.
Yes.
But who do you all think?
I agree with you, Carl. I know who we both agree.
Okay. Tell me who I'm thinking.
Well,
of.
I think it goes all the way up to the White House. Yes, and it's just part and parcel of hemming in China. China knows that.
I think my actual suspicion, and this has far less to do with the significance of the matter than just one's speculations. I suspect Susan Rice.
Okay.
Susan Rice. Now, remember who Susan Rice is. Susan Rice is the National Security Advisor right now for Obama.
Oh, right.
She's a nasty piece of work. She really is. And she was primarily responsible as Hillary Clinton's creature for the assault on Libya. They worked the no-fly zone resolution through the Security Council, and then immediately violated it by using NATO to attack Libya and overthrow the Libyan government, which had actually been following orders, but not with enough alacrity to please Washington. I think Rice. Remember, and Rice also was turfed out as Secretary of State in favor of the impossible John Kerry. Yeah. And I don't think she was particularly happy with that outcome, and took National Security Advisor as consolation prize. Her fingerprints are all over this. I mean, but I don't. By speculating on that, I don't mean to suggest anything other than this is what this administration is doing. The belligerent tone towards Asia in general, which is masked by this sports metaphor that the president uses, pivoting to Asia. The belligerent attitude toward Asia is just being played out here, and she's in a position to do it. But you look at this and you wonder, what can they be thinking in Washington? Why are they wanting to press this right now? And that ramifies back, I think, perhaps to the Thai situation.
Not knowing enough about this background, just hearing a little bit I did in the media like this morning, and then just hearing both of you talk about this, it almost seems like the Obama administration is sending a signal to both China and Japan, saying we're not going to allow any kind of conflict to happen in Asia.
Not conflict between the two of them.
Correct.
And more importantly, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to do anything that will allow the general American military hegemony in the Western Pacific to be modified.
Correct.
And this is, in some sense, I mean, it's really quite remarkable. It's sort of like the U.S. saying we want notification when other countries fly planes in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, that's about as the East China Sea region is about as adjacent to China as the Gulf of Mexico is to the U.S. So, I mean, it's not a major challenge, but the reaction of the United States suggests that you're quite right. The U.S. Intends to continue to set the rules of the game.
Well, I do know for a long, long, long time now. I studied in Japan in 1970 briefly for a summer at Jochi or Sophia University. And my Japanese professors were it's interesting, although I had Jesuit priests for some courses, but I did have a
I want to mention a Jesuit priest in a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did have, for sociology, I did have a Japanese professor, educated U.S. Berkeley, scholar in Canada, who actually was very opposed to rearming Japan. He said he was a boy soldier, and he said he was just about ready to be a kamikaze pilot when it all ended. And so in spite of, he was very anti-U.S. involvement in Vietnam, in Asia, etc. But rearming Japan, he felt would be a major, major mistake. And now I see us rearming Japan. We've encouraged them to spend their money and focus it on military weapons, which we are now sending them. And I look back at World War II and the actual war that was taking place, the atrocities that were taking place in the late 30s, committed against the Chinese by the Japanese. It was known. Some people were actually happy that the Japanese were bogged down in Asia, okay? Just as they were happy that, let me put it this way, I think we really have to ask ourselves, would the U.S. be pleased to see Japan and China in confrontation? How would that play out?
Well, that there's certainly something to that. The U.S. wants to use Japan, as it has basically since the Second World War, as a staging a forward staging area in Asia, and certainly the constraints on China is exactly what they're worried about in Washington. We have a few minutes left. You're listening to News from Neptune. I have a question for the two of you. Which radical leftist in the world political scene said the following this week? As long as the problems of the poor are not radically resolved by rejecting the absolute autonomy of markets and financial speculation and by attacking the structural causes of inequality, no solution will be found for the world's problems, or for that matter, to any problems.
That radical leftist was not Noam Chomsky. It
Nope.
was the Pope. And I might actually start going back to church again after that.
You're absolutely right as far as the...
Sorry, Dave, I
yeah,
didn't
that's
give you a
right.
chance to respond.
Beat
but
me to the punch.
I was raised Catholic, and I can't tell you how pleasing this is to me to see.
Karen is absolutely right, of course. This is from a long statement issued by the Bishop of Rome, as he styles himself usually, this week. An extensive statement that has been, I think the most interesting thing about the responses to it has come from those conservative Catholics who are just appalled by what they're hearing from Rome these days, and are doing their best to
Having poisoned?
well, there's been talk of that, but
my
they're doing their
God.
best. Sure. In fact, the Italian security warned last week that the mafia, the 'Ndrangheta, the southern mafia, was concerned about mounting some sort of attack against the Pope because of his reform of the Vatican Bank. And the 'Ndrangheta has some deposits of it there, apparently. So
Yes.
Wow.
But in any case, the political line is the most interesting one, because we've had everyone from the editorial writers at the New York Times to particularly conservative Catholics in this country. And remember, people like Paul Ryan see themselves as Catholics, and talk about that on the campaign trail about it. But all of these folks have been saying, well, of course, this is the Pope talking about religion. He's not really talking about politics. Just
or anything in the world, for that matter.
Exactly. It's remarkable.
On the other hand...
But let me tell you who got it right. Let me tell you who got it right. Quote, "This is just pure Marxism coming out of the mouth of the Pope." Now, I'm quoting here someone we don't often quote on News from Neptune. That was Rush Limbaugh this week. Now, remember, Rush is vicious. He's not dumb.
Right.
And he, over against those defensive liberals and Catholics and so forth who want to say the Pope can't really mean what he's saying, Limbaugh says, yeah, he does mean what he's saying.
Yes.
He says, someone got to him. Oh. That was Rush's, isn't that wonderful? That was Rush's notion. He says, but this is pure Marxism coming out of the mouth of the Pope.
Yeah,
he's right.
Unbelievable. He's right. Of course
now, look,
it is.
Just
of course it
to
is.
underline the point and to show why Rush is right and why News from Neptune's defense of Rush Limbaugh continues, we have to remember that Marxism, which is a term of abuse in American political debate, not a term of analysis, Marxism in its essence is not a theory about socialism or communism at all. The old man in the British Museum spent his life trying to understand how capitalism worked. It's Marxism in general is an analysis of capitalism. If ever he talks about a post-capitalist society, he usually lapses into poetry. He'll be he envisions a society when one could be a hunter in the morning, a fisher in the afternoon, and a critical critic in the evening. Only academics can do that now, you know. But for Marx, this is his picture of a post-capitalist society, and he does it in this, in jokes almost about the situation of labor in a post-capitalist society, because what he wants to analyze is how it works. In other words, Limbaugh is absolutely right when he points out that the Pope here is talking about what Marx was talking about in understanding the way capitalism works and how its enormities are accomplished and what has to be done to prevent them. So Russia's got it right.
Well,
and the
I
Pope,
believe that.
The Pope is upsetting a lot of people who think that the Pope is on their side, and he's not. So, interesting development this week.
Very interesting, yeah. Now, I don't know that the feminists are too thrilled with what he's had to say, but I think you always have to look at what is the big picture, what is the priority, and I think the Pope, what he has said, I mean, wasn't that the practice of Jesus? Wasn't it the message of Jesus?
Well, let's take that other point, too. There are plenty of feminists who are quite happy with that. I mean, the Feminists for Life of America is a rather interesting group who I post occasionally statements from them in various places. They're perfectly happy with it. But what you allude to, Karen, I thought was particularly badly brought out by Democracy Now! This week, which reported the Pope's statement, but without any of the clear analysis that we got from Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, you're right.
What they said, they immediately turned to identity politics.
I see.
They said, no, I don't see anything here about the ordination of women. I mean, that's not what he was talking about.
Right.
I don't see anything here about abortion.
Why should he talk about that?
He's been quite clear about this all along. Yeah. Why should he talk about that? That's not what the statement was. The statement was an attack on capitalism, as Rush saw. And we know that in American politics, for 40 years of neoliberalism, what liberals have done is given up any sort of class analysis of their politics and substituted an identity politics analysis.
Okay, you're right.
And here was Amy Goodman doing exactly that on Democracy Now! The other morning. We normally praise that program here. It is clearly the most distinguished news program available on television here. But I thought this was a horrible example of one of the major things wrong with American liberalism in their reaction to the Pope's statement.
Carl, the reason I mention this is because I actually saw a posting on Facebook of the Pope, and it was the same thing where he was saying what he did about Marxism and capitalism and whatnot. And then it said, but women cannot be ordained as priests. Did he actually say that? And that's what I'm referring to. But maybe he didn't actually say that because he didn't even address the topic.
It's a very...
But it was one of those
He did. He did say that the restriction of the ordination to males will continue. I mean,
Okay,
that's
right.
You know,
Which,
but,
who cares?
This is,
I don't care. I don't want to be a priest. I mean,
in some sense, well, but I think the reaction to it from people from Amy Goodman to Rush Limbaugh is perhaps the interesting point here, and the reason that we have a statement substantially to the left of any mainstream politician in Europe or
Right.
America,
Right.
that suddenly becomes an issue of identity politics. Well, that's outrageous. You're
Yes,
watching News from
yes,
Neptune.
it is. It is.
We have only a few minutes left. Anybody has a candidate for Coburn's Corner? Language that should be eliminated? I think I just did that, but
Yes.
Yes, quite well, I might add.
Yeah, but I think I just think you made a very, very good point. It's like, how important is it to people's lives whether or not women can be ordained as priests or not?
we can talk about
The
that,
most
and we can talk
important
about
thing-
other
I don't really
arrangements.
want to because I
Yeah.
don't think it's all that important.
But, well-
I think what's important is what the Pope said, and
You
to
and
me,
Rush are down on this.
I can't believe I'm
Like
on
a
the
broken
same
clock. Rush
I'm-
Limbaugh
Yeah.
can be right occasionally, like
I-
a broken clock's
yeah.
right twice a day. So.
Yeah, I cannot believe I'm on the same
Yeah.
same page as Rush Limbaugh right now.
I
yeah.
thought you'd be amused. Yes,
Yes, it is amusing. But yeah, you got it right.
You've been watching News from Neptune for the 48th week of 2013, and our program is named in honor of Noam Chomsky. If our program interested you, you might want to look for similar programs here on Urbana Public Television, now not only on cable, but streaming online at urbanapublictelevision.org. David, what do you have coming? You have a program, you counted today's action at Walmart, is that right?
That's probably not going to be aired for a while, but we have a really good program coming up on Latest Worldview this Sunday from 4 to 5 p.m. It's Robert Greenwald's new film, American Drone Wars. And it was shown earlier, it was shown last month, and we decided it was such a great film, we're going to show it again this month.
Excellent. Tuesday night at 10 p.m., the AWARE program from the Anti-War Anti-Racism effort of Champaign-Urbana, AWARE on the air. And inshallah, next week at this time, News from Neptune once again. We also mentioned that Democracy Now! Is available here now twice a day, at 7 a.m. in the morning on weekdays and at 5 in the evening. The program Tom Hartman's Big Picture, which includes a number of other things, including pieces from RT that we've been
Right.
talking about, a television station broadcast system, sort of like the BBC. That's very good. We were quoting it earlier today. It's one of the few good sources, I think, for world news these days. I'm Carl Estabrook. My discussants tonight on News from Neptune have been Karen Aram and David Johnson. I can be reached at carl@newsfromneptune.com and on our Facebook page, and I'm happy to receive your comments. Our thanks to UPTV, especially Jake, Jason, and Caleb. Inshallah, we'll be back next week with a new edition of News from Neptune to remind you, in the words of Edward de Vere, what's past is prologue, what to come and yours and my discharge. In the meantime, confusion to our enemies, and a good night to you.